Live in Western Oregon, this is NBC 16 News at 6:30.
Explosive testimony was released today in the impeachment inquiry into President Trump and the Ukraine scandal. Two White House officials expressing extreme alarm at what became clear to them. A White House campaign involving Rudy Giuliani and others to push Ukraine to investigate Joe and Hunter Biden if Ukraine wanted anything from the U.S. Thanks for joining us on NBC 16 News at 6:30. Filling in for Alan Matthews, I am Alexis Thrower. Depositions were released from Dr. Fiona Hill, a former top advisor on Russia to President Trump, and Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. Vindman, the National Security Council's top Ukraine expert, was on the now infamous July 25th phone call between President Trump and Ukraine's president. CNN's Alex Marquardt reports.
Two of the most central players in the relationship with Ukraine, putting the president's chief of staff at the center of the scandal and delivering the harshest blow to the president's claim there was no quid pro quo.
This is a hoax. This is just like the Russian witch hunt.
Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, the top Ukraine expert on the National Security Council, telling lawmakers there was no ambiguity that in order for Ukraine's president to get a meeting at the White House, they had to investigate the Bidens. Vindman was on the call between the U.S. and Ukrainian presidents on July 25th, which he said left no doubt that this is what was required in order to get the meeting that the Ukrainians had been aggressively pushing for. Vindman also heard that message from Gordon Sondland, U.S. ambassador to the European Union, who was relaying a message from acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney. Mulvaney admitted to the quid pro quo last month.
Get over it. There's going to be political influence in foreign policy.
The decorated colonel testified he responded that it was inappropriate and had nothing to do with national security.
Well, I want to thank Colonel Vindman for his courage in coming forward, his willingness to follow the law, to do his duty.
Vindman wasn't alone. His then boss, Dr. Fiona Hill, read the transcript of the call and said she was shocked. "I sat in an awful lot of calls," she said, "and I have not seen anything like this." Hill had also been told by Sondland that Mulvaney stated that the Ukrainians would get a presidential meeting if the Ukrainians started up these investigations again. Hill testified that Sondland told this directly to the Ukrainians in a July 10th meeting. John Bolton, who was national security advisor at the time, suddenly ended the meeting. Bolton then told Hill to report it to the top NSC lawyer, saying, "I'm not part of whatever drug deal Sondland and Mulvaney are cooking up." Vindman, who was also disturbed by the meeting, reported it as well. Hill and Vindman had both known about the role that Rudy Giuliani was playing in Ukraine, pushing the conspiracy theories and working to get the U.S. ambassador removed. After he was successful, Bolton told Hill that Giuliani was a hand grenade that's going to blow everybody up.
A recent attack on a President Trump supporter wearing a MAGA hat, once again bringing to the surface the rising tension between people when it comes to politics. As national correspondent Angelica Alvarez reports, some experts are still optimistic things will get better in 2020 and beyond.
Robert Youngblood was in a Florida restaurant wearing his Make America Great Again hat when surveillance video shows a man walking behind Youngblood and put what he says was a balled up wet paper towel on the brim of his hat.
And I hear him yelling and screaming at the top of his voice.
Youngblood says he was attacked for wearing his MAGA hat, another example of politics coming to a boiling point in public. In February, on UC Berkeley's campus, this conservative activist was punched in the face. Also, a Coast Guard lieutenant was arrested, accused of having a hit list of Democrats and journalists.
We've seen these types of incidents happen for decades, or really centuries.
Political analyst John Hudak with the Brookings Institute says emotions are heightened with camera phones and a distrust of the government.
I think passions are running high on both sides and because of both sides.
Scott Rasmussen with ScottRasmussen.com says recent polling shows the fight really is among the extreme partisan, but believes this extreme behavior could eventually calm down.
It may get worse before it gets better, but I do think eventually we'll get to a time where we have a little more willingness to accept opposing views.
In Washington, I'm Angelica Alvarez.
An Oklahoma woman who has served 15 years in prison for failing to report her boyfriend's abuse of her children has been released from prison. Tondaleo Hall was released from prison this morning after Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt commuted her sentence. Her release comes a month after the State Pardon and Parole Board voted unanimously to recommend that Stitt commute her sentence to time served. Hall, who was originally sentenced to 30 years, says she's thankful to finally be free. Hall's former boyfriend, Robert Braxton Jr., pleaded guilty to abusing the children and was sentenced to 10 years. He was then released on probation after a couple of years in jail. The discrepancy between the two punishments prompted widespread outrage and put a spotlight on Oklahoma's high incarceration rate, the highest in the country. Retired Eugene Springfield Fire Chief Randy Groves is looking to get back into city government. He's a candidate for Eugene City Council. The retired chief is running for the city council spot being vacated by Councilman Chris Pryor. Among his top issues are affordable housing and homelessness. Groves says too often he sees homeless people with mental health issues given initial help at the hospital, but no follow-up treatment, and the cycle then continues.
2 or 3 days, the cycle starts again. It's the most expensive, ineffective way to deal with the problem, and it's really not helping this population. So I think we can do better.
Groves retired from the Eugene Springfield Fire Department in early 2016. He also joins Matt Keating as a fully declared candidate in the Ward 8 race. A third man, Ryan Moore, has filed early paperwork to run for the same post. On to a first look at weather. NBC 16 meteorologist Josh Cozart joins us now in the Weather Center. Josh, the fog hasn't been as thick today in comparison to what we've seen the past couple of days.
Well, unfortunately, Alexis, I know you're not a big fan of the fog, but it's going to be moving back in later tonight. But really, conditions are going to be on the fairly nice side for the next several days as temperatures just slide back by a few degrees. But today we managed to be on the warm side of things. It felt more like October than the month of November as temperatures nearly touched 70 degrees for the Eugene-Springfield area, in towards the mid-60s, down towards the Umpqua Valley, and into the 50s out towards the coast. But right now our temperatures are really sliding back in towards the low 50s with still clear conditions. No fog moving in just yet, but it soon will be moving into our area. And if you're just now running out the door to hit the Beavs game, well, temperatures are going to be falling off into the low 40s, so be sure to pack that heavier coat because it always typically seems to get chilly in those stands. But radar and satellite showing a slight increase in the cloud coverage from the west to the east, a trend that we continue to see through the overnight hours tonight as our temperatures do fall back in towards the low 40s for many of us. But rain, we desperately need it, and we have a few chances for it. I'll have all those details in just a few minutes.
Thank you so much, Josh. Many business owners are up in arms over recent acts of vandalism on their properties. They say the crimes are committed by homeless people. Now we're hearing from a Eugene woman who says she was threatened as she walked downtown. NBC 16's Stephanie Rothman shares her story.
I'm literally paying the price for this now.
On October 10th, Eugene resident Julie King left jury duty. Walking to her car downtown, she says a woman suddenly blocked her.
This lady came around the corner screaming at the top of her lungs, making stabby motions. This is the corner she came around, and I landed like pretty much right in the middle of the street.
Trying to duck the woman, who she believes to be homeless, King fell back, hitting the pavement.
I landed on my head. I got a nice big bump, broke my glasses, but the main thing that took the brunt of my fall was my wrist.
She went to the hospital with a broken arm. A metal plate was screwed in to keep it in place. Since the woman technically didn't touch her, King says she can't press charges, and medical bills are piling up.
My career is potentially even affected by this. You know, all these things, it just is a snowball effect.
Her husband, Peter, works for Pipework Studio downtown on Broadway. He says as he's walked to and from work, he's seen this violent behavior too, even involving children.
Yelling at them and swearing at them and telling them that they want to beat them up. And we're talking about 6-year-old kids here. You know, it's like, it's ridiculous.
He says with the drugs, loitering, and a wave of threats downtown, some of his workers have decided not to move their families here because they're scared for their safety. As for Julie,
we spent the whole day talking about what do you do? What's a reasonable response when you feel threatened? I spent the whole day talking about that, left the courthouse, and was threatened.
She hopes her story encourages others to speak up and hold those being violent accountable. Reporting in Eugene, I'm Stephanie Rothman.
A panhandling ordinance has not been adopted in Eugene as of yet. At a city club meeting today, the community came out to talk about what needs to be done with crime, livability, and issues with homelessness. That's where we talked to Chief Chris Skinner of the Eugene Police Department to find out how police would enforce a future panhandling ordinance. He says the city is always looking at ways to create higher livability, but it's up to the city to pass the ordinance first.
And at a council level, they determine what ordinances they think are applicable for the city, and then they'll enact those ordinances. And then we have to figure out a way to enforce them and do it equitably and fairly instead of heavy-handedly. A lot of education, a lot of response to complaints as opposed to proactive policing.
Earlier this year, the Eugene City Council voted not to pass a panhandling ordinance, as some called it unconstitutional. City councilors say the ordinance was initially presented as a safety concern. Coming up next on NBC 16 at 6:30, new medical technology in Coos County is helping grieving families. And later in the show, as awareness for climate change continues to grow, 2 scientists in our own backyard are leading a global coalition.
You're watching NBC 16 News at 6:30.
A new technology helps grieving families who have lost a child. Thanks to a nonprofit and a Coquille mom, it's now being used at Bay Area Hospital in Coos Bay. NBC 16's Lauren Negretti has a story.
Suzanne Swan and her husband Paul have lost 3 children between them.
So when I gave birth, she was already gone.
She experienced 2 stillborns in the late 70s.
You never really get over it. You just sort of learn to survive and live with it.
She and Marissa Yeager-Peterson connected via social media and raised over $20,000 in April to get a cuddle cot for several hospitals, including Bay Area Hospital. It's something Swan wished she'd had.
It's a refrigerated bassinet that allows the baby to spend more time with the family without the decomposition setting in that's natural upon demise.
That's the faint hum of the cuddle cot. OB Tech Jenny Smith explains it takes distilled water to a cooling pad lying under a baby. The cuddle cot chills the water to 46 degrees Fahrenheit to keep the baby cool and to give families the gift of time. Smith has had a miscarriage, has friends who've lost children, and says she sympathizes with those families.
We really support bonding with our parents as much as possible. We know this is the only chance they're going to get.
Smith says the cuddle cot gives them the time together they need.
Cuddle cots allow so many memories to happen.
To the surprise of Swan, Yeager-Peterson had this cuddle cot dedicated to the memory of Swan's angel babies. Reporting from Coos County, I'm Lauren Negretti.
Federal health officials may be one step closer to figuring out what is causing vaping-related lung injuries. CDC officials tested lung fluid samples taken from 29 EVALI patients, and vitamin E acetate was detected in all of them. While this is the first time the agency has detected a toxin of concern, officials stress more research is needed. That includes a comparison of the fluids from EVALI patients with those from patients with other lung illnesses that have nothing to do with vaping. While vitamin E acetate is found in foods, supplements, and skin cream, officials say it does not cause harm when swallowed or applied topically to the skin. So far, 2,051 cases have been reported in 49 states, as well as Washington, D.C. and the U.S. Virgin Islands. At least 39 deaths have been reported. Turning to weather now, NBC 16 meteorologist Josh Cozart is standing by for a look at what's coming up in your full forecast. Josh?
Well, Alexis, we're going to see increasing foggy conditions across western Oregon and a very slim chance for some rain showers. I'll have those details coming up next.
Fall savings are here, and there's no weather with meteorologist Josh Cozart.
Well, many of us got to experience plentiful sunshine and temperatures well above average over the past several days. But if you ever question if the atmosphere was like a liquid, I think that this answers it pretty well as these clouds move in like a stream of water over the Coburg Hills earlier this evening. But now that the sun has set, temperatures are starting to slide back and the clouds will be increasing. But the National Weather Service does have most of the valley areas still under an air stagnation advisory that extends all the way until Tuesday afternoon for many locations. until we finally get some fresher air to move into our area. But our radar and satellite showing calm, quiet conditions through the valleys and out towards the coast just a little bit earlier ago on our satellite. Now that the sun sets, a little bit more difficult to see, but we are starting to have some of the clouds move from the west into the east, and that will be a trend that we continue to see through the overnight hours, also along with the development of some fog in low-lying areas. But temperatures aren't going to be too bad, anywhere from the low 40s all the way up to the mid 40s as we make our way through the rest of tonight. But high pressure remains our dominant feature, but there is an end in sight and allowing our rain chances to move back into our forecast with that high dipping its way further to the south. This next low pressure system still being forced northward, but it's this next one out towards the Pacific Ocean that slowly starts to track its way closer to the coastal areas with its adjacent cold front, and that's when our rain chances really start to increase in our neck of the woods. We just have to be patient until we roll into Thursday. But with our futurecast, you'll notice we'll wake up on our Saturday with mostly cloudy skies, foggy conditions in the valleys, and even out towards some coastal areas. But once we get into the afternoon hours, pockets of sunshine likely down towards the Umpqua Valley, southern Willamette Valley, and most of the coastal areas will remain overcast. But then once we roll into our Sunday, still foggy towards the southern Willamette Valley, pockets of sunshine in the Umpqua Valley, and then by the time we roll into the afternoon hours, a little bit more sunshine than clouds, so we just have to get through tomorrow's overcast skies. But we desperately still need to see the rainfall, as we've only managed to get about a trace in the Coos Bay and Eugene area. These are the numbers we should be seeing already for the month of November, so we are quickly falling behind. Mother Nature needs to give us a nice drink of water here sooner than later. But temperatures for tomorrow are going to be anywhere from the upper 50s to the low 60s with mostly overcast skies. And you can see that with our extended forecast that the mostly cloudy skies really kind of trump the sunny conditions, but temperatures are going to be slightly above average for the next 7 days, and overnight lows not too shabby in towards the 40s for many of us. But out towards the coast, overcast for your Saturday, a foggy start, maybe a rain shower or two possible Saturday night into Sunday. I think you'll consider yourself lucky if you actually see any rainfall, but we do get another shot at those rain chances on Tuesday and again on our Thursday. Down towards the Umpqua Valley, still dry conditions for the next several days. Overcast skies for our Saturday. Veterans Day, a high of 62, and then the clouds move in for the beginning part of our work week. Rain chances return on our Thursday, Alexis. This is all kind of not typical for this time of year.
Oh, well, I can deal with the clouds as long as you hold on to the rain.
Even though we need it.
And, well, I can appreciate that climate. And speaking of climate, 2 scientists in our own backyard are leading a global coalition declaring a climate emergency, and some lawmakers are listening. This week, OSU scientists Bill Ripple and Christopher Wolf published a paper in Bioscience declaring a climate emergency. More than 11,000 scientists from 153 countries signed on. Ripple has been working with the U.S. Congressman Earl Blumenauer to help jumpstart federal efforts for policy changes, which is now a proposed resolution in the U.S. House.
We're sharing with all the House offices this report, a letter signed by the scientists that kind of provide a punctuation point.
The resolution has been co-sponsored by 80 House members, 6 senators, and 14 independent organizations. The last firefighter strike team from Lane County is back home tonight after fighting fires in wildfires in California. The crews pulled into the Cottage Grove Fire Station this evening. The team is made up of firefighters from Lane Fire Authority, Eugene Springfield Fire, South Lane Fire and Rescue, and Coburg Fire. They were in California for 13 days. The team fought the Burris and Kincaid fires, and while traveling home, they were diverted to help fight the Ranch Fire near Red Bluff. Coming up next on NBC 16 at 6:30, Veterans Day is on Monday, but many schools have been honoring those who have served before the holiday. We'll take you to one such ceremony on the South Coast.
And Doug. You're watching NBC 16 News at 6:30.
With Veterans Day coming up on Monday, students at Millicoma Intermediate School in Coos Bay honored veterans on the South Coast today. NBC 16's Amanda Slee has the story.
This assembly was more than just hearing stories about veterans. It was an interactive learning experience as well.
First thing, you're going to make eye contact out of respect for the people.
Patrick Wright, a veteran who helps other veterans as the executive director of Brian's Home, talked with students about how to thank veterans for their service.
Most kids don't do it because they don't know how. So if they know how, I'm hoping more will.
Enright addressed another issue.
Our youth are bullying each other, which is causing kids to harm themselves, which we don't want. And I'm going to use every opportunity like this to address that issue.
During the assembly, speakers and members of the community took the time to acknowledge one local veteran, Brian Bertrand.
I think about Brian a lot when talk of service comes up, talk of sacrifice, and I'm thankful that for what he did, it provides me the opportunity to do what I do now.
As the program ended, students showed their appreciation for the veterans and other speakers.
It made me feel inspired because of everybody who was here and everybody that was participating in this and all the veterans that showed up.
I'm just happy that Millicoma takes so much pride in this Veterans Assembly, and I'm hoping that it'll not just translate into Veterans Day, but it'll translate into every day.
Now that students have learned more about veterans and why we honor them, one speaker has tasked them with thanking veterans on Monday's day off. Reporting in Coos County, I'm Amanda Slee.
Coming up next on NBC 16 at 6:30, the Maud Kearns Art Center is giving community members the chance to use the space to create photography masterpieces at a low cost. More when we come back.
Do you ever wonder what beavers actually store?
After nearly 2 decades of being abandoned, the dark room at the Maud Kearns Art Center is open to the community, and it's thanks to a nonprofit started by film photography enthusiasts who wanted to keep the art alive. The group says for years the community had few options for accessing dark rooms, most of which were costly. After countless hours revamping the old dark room at the Art Center, they're offering it to the community at an affordable price. The Eugene Dark Room Group is currently on a 6-month trial period, and they are offering trial memberships to a select few for only $30 a month to use the space to create their special works of art. They hope to expand the membership in the future. That's awesome.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. I love black and white film photography.
Yes, and I took a photography class when I was in high school, and I loved it. So that was
Same.
pretty cool. So thanks for watching NBC 16 News at 6:30. We'll see you back here at 11.
Okay, Sheldon and Amy are